Welcome to today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. We still have a lot of active outlooks that keep getting extended into the future and pretty high percentages or categories for this time of year. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Let's take a look at this. Today, Thursday, we have this enhanced risk area here around Sioux Falls and much of eastern South Dakota. A couple of patches of the slight risk, that's the yellow, pretty large area of the northern plains, a little bit out in West Kansas, and this little area here, which is mainly a wind threat, I think, in Tennessee, parts of northern Alabama, Georgia, and a small sliver of Mississippi. The tornado risk is really just only in or near this level 2 and 3 area up here in the central and northern plains. So there is a little bit of a tornado risk, only a 2% chance of one within 25 miles, but still for the summer, having that registered is actually pretty important. It just kind of tells me the jet stream is still fairly active. But again, this is really shifting more toward a wind threat this time of year, but the tornado risk is always there, especially for any isolated supercell that can find a footing on an old boundary or something like that. It actually could be, because, the air is very unstable, so it could be very intense if one were to occur, although the Storm Prediction Center has not pulled the trigger on a significant scale on this. So they're not thinking the tornado risk is very high today. Now, NATOcast does put a 5% risk in north central Iowa, with 3% surrounding that. So that's something to note. A little bit of a risk of that out in Kansas, too. And up around North Dakota. But those are pretty isolated. This one is the most concentrated of all of them. Now, like I said, wind risk becomes an increasing threat this time of year. So this, again, down here around Nashville and into around Huntsville, Alabama, that area, that's primarily wind. And then we certainly see this area up here, which has got numerous thunderstorm threats again, and day after day after day. So the wind risk is high there, and there are some hatchings there. So the hatchings is indicated by, this intensity level here. So the Storm Prediction Center is saying best chance of a severe wind of 59 miles per hour or greater is that 30% area, and lesser chances in the yellow. But everybody in the black, regardless of the percentage chance that you're going to get a severe wind gust, is in this kind of intensity estimation here. So the vast majority of this is going to stay below hurricane force. But there is a little bit of a chance, 16% chance it could be greater than 74 miles per hour. And then the hail risk is out there in the northern plains, but it's not very high, and it's only a 15% chance up in the Dakotas for the most part. Now, CSU is showing a little bit of a tornado risk up here, not mentioning Iowa at all for what they are talking about. Wind, yeah, but hail, I'm sorry, not so much. But the wind risk is actually up in southern Wisconsin, which I find interesting. It's a little bit divergent from what the SPC is saying. So just be aware of that. And that's a pretty high percentage to ignore, 45%. So I'd be watching out in Iowa, southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois for that later on tonight if these thunderstorms congeal into something like a line, which happens very often in the summer. Now on Friday, we still have, this has been enhanced again, or upgraded to enhanced, level 3 in almost the same place. In Iowa, though, and in Nebraska, more like tomorrow, Friday. Tornado risk equally kind of like, it's out there, but at least the Storm Prediction Center is only putting it at 2%, and that's the only area in the country, whereas NATOcast does up that to a 5% risk in that same corridor. It also talks about northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and a little part of far northwestern Nebraska, South Dakota as well. The wind risk ever present and highest again. Same corridor, it's just shifted a little bit for Friday from here to here. And then we have that 30% chance in red, and I can zoom in on that. Wind risk again, highest in Norfolk, Omaha, Lincoln, Sioux City, Storm Lake, almost back to O'Neill, actually in O'Neill, Nebraska. And so again, the SIG is that first hatching there. So pretty much everything, the highest percentage is staying below the 74 mile per hour gust and above the 59 mile per hour gust. Hail again present, but like today's forecast, not predominant. And you can see the percentages yourself and staying in that highest risk area. As for tornado, nothing really mentioned at all with CSU. The hail risk splits in two, but is mostly on Friday concentrated in the Dakotas, and the wind risk kind of shifts over into southern Michigan, on over into Pennsylvania, New York, and maybe a small sliver there of Connecticut, and parts of New England. Now, on Saturday, everything settles down here in the Great Plains quite a bit, now down to a marginal risk, level 1. And then for Saturday, the 4th, the highest risk of any severe weather is going to be from New York State, or southern New York State, New York City itself, and including Delaware, Maryland, much of northern and northeastern Virginia. So be watching for that for Saturday. As far as what the threats are here, tornado not really mentioned, although interestingly, it is kind of popped up there in Wisconsin. Keep an eye on that. But it's a wind risk out in that area that I just talked about, with hail being a lot less of a probability. Not impossible with any supercell, of course, but not really the primary focus of that severe risk out there, where we just highlighted that slight risk area from the SPC. And then on Sunday, it's still out there, almost the same place, not quite up to New York State, but much of Virginia, Maryland, and a part of Delaware on Sunday. And so that's the forecast I just showed you there on the right. And then what CSU's learning machine shows is, yes, it includes that, but it makes it a little larger area all the way down to the Carolinas and parts of Ohio and Indiana. And then no more SPC talk on this, but a little bit of probability there on Monday. Out in the Carolinas, even smaller on Tuesday. And beyond that, the probabilities are pretty unimpressive. There is a trend, and I'll show it to you here on NIU's products. This sums up the next basically 7 days. I stopped the date up here because I keep forgetting to do it, but you can just read it right there. The 2nd through the 8th of July, high probabilities in all the areas I just showed you. Then it backs off considerably the second week, which is the 9th through the 15th. Still the same kind of general areas, but not as much red. And then really calms down for the July 16th through the 22nd period, only this area here. And I'll have to look at the 2 and 3 week hurricane forecasts, because that looks suspicious to me that would be hanging out right there. But I'll look that up. And I know they issue one, I think it's on Tuesday, so there should be one in the system, but too late for this video, but I'll post it on Facebook if I see something that connects this to possible tropical activity in that time period.